attendance policy that I went over at the beginning of the semester. I give you 5 absences. Guys, that's a boatload. And you run into problems if you take 4 days off and then an emergency happens. So in other words, those 5 days are meant for emergencies. They're meant when life gets in the way, you get sick, something happens. They're not meant for you to randomly take 4 days off and then when a legitimate emergency arises. You understand what I'm saying? So don't look at it as, well, I got all these, I gotta use them or lose them. When you don't come to class, you lose, right? The information and being here, let me explain to you. So take advantage of those when you need them. Don't look at it as days you have to have. And that's why I don't deal with excuses. I give you so many absences for those types of reasons. All right, important concept to remember. Plyometric sequence, or sometimes referred to as stretch shortening cycle. You may hear that in physiology or another kinesiology class. There are 3 key words to remember. 3 key words. Eccentric work, or eccentric contraction. Concentric contraction. And then here's the main word. Change in direction. When you change direction, when you have to stop motion going one way and then turn around and create motion going another way, that takes a lot of force. So don't look at an entire repetition as plyometrics. Like if we're doing a bench press, plyometrics wouldn't be lowering it down followed by bringing it up. That's way too much time. It's specifically when it came time to slow it down followed by speeding it up. You had all 3 components. You had the eccentric, which the whole range of motion has. You had the concentric, which the whole range of motion has. But the key third word there was change direction. You didn't start to change direction until the bottom part, right? Until you started to slow down your motion, then immediately speed up your motion. So in those repetitions, I think if you hold on to those 3 key components, eccentric, concentric, change direction. Eccentric, concentric, change direction. Where is it in the exercise or the functional task that I have eccentric, concentric, and I change direction? There's your sequence, there's your plyometrics, there's your stretch short side. Okay? And again, the reason that's important is because when things are being pulled apart, we tap into some extra energy. We call it stored elastic potential energy, and that energy from the structure being stretched can be utilized to return to its original shape because it has elasticity. So we can get some extra force when something is being lengthened and then it is allowed to shorten. We get some extra hold. Okay? So, any questions about that before we move on to some more examples and some practical understandings? All right. I got some fun ones for us to look at today. Okay, left shoulder, starting in this position, left shoulder abducts and right shoulder flexes. Slow and controlled motion. She's not trying to do as many as she can. She's not trying to flap her arms. So starting here, left shoulder abducts, slower than what gravity can offer, and right shoulder flexes, slower than what gravity can offer. Things you're going to need to be able to tell me. What group of muscles I need to make a call to do that job, to do that work, and the type of work that those agonistic muscles, the group of muscles, are going to be doing. Okay, let's start there. Ready, go. Left shoulder abducts, right shoulder flexes from this position. Who did it? How? Go. Guys, if you want to feel this, no problem. I'm going to have my arm out. If anybody wants to come and hang their legs over my arm, I'll hold you up and then you can see, maybe feel which muscles. But here's what's cool is you don't have to do it to do a thought experiment to figure out who needs to work and why. And again, the reason we do these things is because you guys being trained in human movement, muscles, mechanics, you can apply this information to any sport, any population, any age. You know, we all have the same rules of movement. So whether or not, you know, maybe some of you in athletic training might one day work ice hockey, and it doesn't matter. Like the rules of motion, now the rules of the sport are different, but they're not asking you to coach it. They're asking you to understand movement and injuries and rehab, and all of that's the same. The application is the same. Okay. Left shoulder abducts. So if she starts to move her left shoulder in the frontal plane, gravity in this case would be trying to do what motion to her shoulder? Abductor, yeah, it's trying to cause abduction. So gravity is trying to abduct her, or gravity is trying to cause abduction. It means the same thing. So unless she wants to make her arm go faster than gravity, so if we did a thought experiment, ma'am, turn off all the muscles in the shoulder, arm's just going to flop down, right, at the speed of gravity. So if her muscles are getting a call to do a job and there's motion involved, it's either going to be one set of muscles making it go faster or another set of muscles allowing it to go slow. Okay. So which group of muscles do we need to make a phone call to in this example? Yeah, specifically the left shoulder adductors. Okay. What type of work? Once we give them a call to do a work, they're going to be working through eccentrics, and you can prove that through a sentence. The only way the adductors can be responsible for allowing that adduction is through eccentric work. Because if they would be working concentrically, you'd see adduction, right? We didn't observe that. If I tell you that it's going to abduct, and you figured out that the adductors have to be doing a job because she's not abducting faster than gravity, it has to be through eccentrics. Work and contraction or solve fault. Okay. What about her right shoulder? If she begins to flex, who needs to get a phone call, do a job? The shoulder extensors. Same type of work, right? Eccentric work. Okay. Now, here's the next question. Let's say she gets to parallel with the floor, with the ground. Okay? So in other words, she's going to abduct her shoulder until it gets parallel with the ground. 90 degrees, okay, roughly. And she's going to flex her shoulder until it gets parallel with the ground. Now, instead of keeping it there, now again, she's not going as fast as she can, but she's going to abduct, slow down, change direction, bring it back. And then she's going to flex, slow down, change direction, and bring it back. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Okay? So it's still going to be eccentric the entire time. But what's going to happen is her left shoulder adductors are going to say, hey guys, we got to pull a little bit more than what we've been pulling to allow her to move, because we got to stop her, we got to slow her down. We got to slow down that motion in order to change direction and bring it back up. So they're just going to get a little extra zap. They're just going to get a little bit of extra innervation to slow down the ab and then speed up the ab. If you think about it, it could be eccentric, concentric, but that third word that I gave you today, change in direction. That's really where you need to zoom in. When I give you that change in direction, where did the change in direction happen? The change in direction happened when she was abducted 90 degrees, right? Slowing it down to 90 and then speeding it up to 89, 87, 86. So if I asked you on the test, did the plyometric sequence take place in that position or if our arm was out? In other words, which area is the closest to where that sequence took place? You said, where's the arms out? Because that was eccentric followed by concentric, but that's where the change in direction happened. Now, change in direction, let's say she would just keep doing these sets, all right? Let's say she's just doing several sets of those. She has change in direction there, but that's concentric followed by an eccentric. So it doesn't fit what we need to have that sequence. That was a change in direction, but it wasn't because of the muscle slowing down motion and causing motion. We got gravity to be able to do that. Or if gravity had its sequence, it would be there, because she's kind of letting gravity slow her down, and then letting gravity speed her up. Eccentric, concentric, change in direction. Very important. Let's look at her extensors, allowing the flexion through eccentric. She's got to slow that flexion down, and she's going to speed up the extension with concentric. So where is the plyometric sequence? In roughly the same global reference position, parallel. But those extensors are going to slow down the flexion, change direction, and speed up the extension. What muscles does she need to make a phone call to at her knees? What does she need? Yeah, knee flexors, right? Does that, if she used her knee extensors, she would pull her shins away from the bar, and that would be a bad day. Right? And again, we could look at it and say, man, she needs her knee flexors to do a job, because gravity is pulling her body down, and the post is trying to extend her knees up. It's called a force couple, two different forces in two different linear directions that are trying to spin something the same way. We use force couples a lot with children on the merry-go-round. When you have two adults, one's on one side, one's on this side, and I push the merry-go-round this way, they push the merry-go-round that way, two different linear forces, but guess what? We're trying to spin the merry-go-round in the same direction. Yeah, she needs those flexors. Do you think she needs anything? Well, that's too close to call. We'll get to another one. Any questions about this one? Okay, guys, we're going to do open mic. I'm going to pull up my favorite website, Google, and for the first few examples, I would love for someone to suggest an exercise that you would commonly find in a clinic, in a weight room, something very general that maybe we haven't done yet before. Okay, that might look at a different body part in a different way, so that we can analyze it. We can answer who's working, how are they working, where's my sequence, that kind of stuff. Anybody have something? Maybe this weekend you were doing a study group or you were exercising, like, hey, this would be a good question on the test. Anybody want to toss something out that we can analyze?
Scapular.
Oh, outstanding. You mean shoulder, right?
No.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So many options, so little time. Let's go this way. All right. So, let me lay out some different questions you need to be able to answer. Left to right, agonistic group. Who is changing your position from left to right? Who is responsible for the motion from left to right? It's all different forms of the same question. Once you identify who's responsible, then you can answer, how were they responsible? How did they do it? If you did something, how did you do it? All right? And then we can zoom in to the rabbit hole a little further and say, where did my muscles have eccentric followed by concentric, and there was a change in direction? Where was my plyometric sequence for this group of muscles? Typically, unless there's a functional task, doing several repetitions over and over as fast as you can, running, sprinting, or unless there's very expensive equipment, isokinetic equipment that costs a lot of money, can set up the scenario where you can do this. Majority of time, these plyometric sequences are only going to be done by one group of muscles at a time, because of the scenario of external forces are being very limited. Okay? We can also go, after we answer these first few questions, then we can go into, when do my muscles need to be greater than the weight? When do my muscles are going to be tied with the weight? When do my muscles actually need to let off a little bit and let the weight be greater? We can do that as well. So in other words, I think we can, I say assume, we don't assume, we can infer that this person probably is not going to be doing this. It's probably going to be, and yeah, you can, it's all good. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We just have to be on the same page of how we do it. So, in other words, we just can't have one person interpreting that there's going to be an explosive motion of let it go down. I mean, we can, but we can't have one person interpreting as that and another person interpreting as slow up and slow down. So that's why I say, hey, for this one, we're gonna, these are the givens. This is so that way we're all on the same page. He's gonna speed up the elevation, then a constant velocity of elevation, and slow down the elevation. I do that so that way we're all on the same page, and you're not just doing the exercise. Not that you're doing it the wrong way, but we have to have consistent interpretation of these speed changes, okay? So let's infer that he's just doing this exercise for the photo op. So we're gonna have speed up, we're gonna have constant, we're gonna have slow down. Then we're going to have speed up, we're going to have constant, we're going to have slow down. Slow and control. In fact, on your test, I'm going to put at the top, every exercise, unless otherwise noted, is done with slow and controlled motion. Unless otherwise noted. What would be otherwise noted? Doing as many repetitions as possible. Some kind of a functional task. Okay? Okay? Get after it.
All right, guys, there you have it, man. Alex has spoken. External force trying to do what to your scapula?
It's trying to depress you. Yeah, and again, you can do a thought experiment to see this. You could say, well, if I just relax all the muscles in my scapula at any time during the exercise, what's going to happen? It's going to create traction trying to depress you. All right? So I need the elevators. Now again, why is it important to understand the concept of naming groups? Because if you just say the traps, why can't I just say the traps? Because your traps are fan-shaped. They're actually fibers that are on the lower part that pull in the direction of depression. So not all the traps pull in that direction. And you got other muscles, the scapula, and rhomboids, and other things that pull up. So it's more important for me to get you to see these hypothetical strings that I need for this kind of work, and then eventually we'll be able to identify all the different people in that group. And it's going to prevent you from missing contributing muscles. Because again, if all you ever do is talk about the superstars, you lose track of the other important key people on the team. Okay? So I need elevators. And I need elevators the entire range of motion. Why? Because gravity is trying to depress me the entire range of motion. Same external force, same against variations in motion because of variations in motion. So, left to right. If you read it like a sentence or to see it as your equation, I need my elevators. I observe elevation. The only way that's possible is through concentric work. Now, I know that elevation is motion, change in position. Everything takes time. So if I'm going to have motion, I have to speed up that motion. I may or may not have a constant speed of that motion, a cruise control, and then I got to slow down that motion. Everything's got to do that, especially in our body, because we can't just keep spinning our joints like a wheel. Okay? So speeding up the elevation, elevators, concentric work, my muscles better be a little bit stronger than those dumbbells. They have to be greater in order to make it speed up. Those dumbbells aren't trying to speed me up. However, once I get it going, it's not as tough to keep it going. That's something that I use in class with moving furniture. The hardest thing about moving furniture is getting it going. But once you give it motion, it's not as hard to keep it going. Because I don't have to be greater to keep it going. All I have to do is be equal to keep it going. So if I have a constant velocity of elevation, I know it doesn't happen for a long period of time, but I still have elevators, I still have concentric work, but technically I only have to match the weight. I only have to do what the weight is to keep it going at speed. Slowing down the elevation, still elevators, still concentric work, but your muscles will actually let off a little bit to let planet Earth slow you down. You're not going to keep being tied, because if you keep being tied, you're never going to move. You're not going to do this. You're going to let off a little bit, let gravity slow it down. Then when it comes time to speeding up the depression, elevators, now we're going to have eccentric work, and your muscles again will let gravity speed it up. We didn't have a plyometric sequence there because one, we had concentric work followed by eccentric work, right? That was a change in direction. But it wasn't because of muscle being lengthened followed by a muscle shortening. So, speeding up the depression, elevators, eccentric work, muscles less than the weight. And it's not that the weight increased its force, it's that your muscles let off of their force. They let up. Constant velocity of depression, elevators, eccentric work, time, and then the tough part, right? When it comes time to slow down the depression, that's when your muscles have to work a little bit harder. Elevators, eccentric work, slowing down the depression. If you immediately continue another repetition, you got to change direction and speed up the elevation. So slowing down the depression, immediately followed by speeding up the elevation. Eccentric, concentric, change the direction. Boom, boom, boom. There's my plyometric sequence. Okay. It's a good one. Thank you for that. Can I get another one? I know your options are limited, think of, oh, I know what we can do. Look, let's kick off the training wheels, man. Let's go big. All right, guys. Training wheels off. Oh, Lord. This is going to cause some commotion. In a good way. Oh, Lord. Okay, let's look for clues. Is this person at the beginning of the range of motion, or the middle or end of the range of motion? Beginning, how do we know? The plates, right? Yeah. When you move away from the beginning, the plates move away from each other, right? So this is telling me that the person repositioned the seat, got into it, but they haven't started the range of motion yet because those plates are still connected. Does that make sense? Okay. Now again, we want to make sure we're all on the same page. Once she starts to do this exercise, let's infer that at no time until she's done will she let the weights clang again. In other words, she's going to have constant tension of her muscles, and she's not going to let the weights clang to stop her. Okay? Does that make sense? So in other words, once she gets it off, those plates will never touch again until she's done. This is what makes this exercise tough. Because she has motion from the pelvis's perspective, but because her upper extremity is fixed, she also has motion from the trunk's perspective. So the muscles that are going to be responsible for moving her pelvis and her trunk at the same time are trunk muscles. We don't consider the pelvic girdle to have, the pelvic girdle is a concept. But because I can have hip muscles spin the pelvis and I can have trunk muscles spin the pelvis, they're not consistent. You can have different muscles responsible for spinning the basketball. So we have to look at it from the specific muscles that spun the pelvis. In this case, these are trunk muscles. So we're looking at trunk flexors, trunk extensors, right lateral, right transverse, left transverse. I think it's pretty obvious which two we're trying to twill it down to. So here's some of the questions I'm going to ask you. She starts to create right transverse pelvic girdle rotation, right? That's going to be the first motion you're going to observe. Who did it? How did they do it? If she speeds it up, constant velocity, slows it down, then you can get into less, equal, more. Where's my plyometric sequence in this exercise? If she goes all the way across and all the way back, and all the way across and all the way back, and she never lets those weights clang, she maintains muscle tension the whole time, where's my plyometric sequence at? Is it when her knees are on this side or when her knees are on the other side? Okay? Ready, set, go. Guys, don't forget, you have the gift of swiveling seats. You have the gift of swiveling seats. So if you anchor yourself, you can have your partner or you can have somebody push against your knees. You can create the same external forces in this exercise with your pseudo swivels.
Running as fast as
Already right, Rosie. Right.
You know what's really cool? One day, several of you guys are going to be teaching your peers in graduate school why certain muscles are doing certain things. That's a fact, Jack. So I'm just going to sit back here with my legs up as a proud professor, knowing I'm going to equip you guys to be able to help several students who really have no idea how muscles work. Oh, by the way, for those of you that, once I explain it, for those of you that, I have to be able to feel it. We have a machine in our weight room that does this. So you can field trip, call an Uber to take you to the weight room, and all right, here we go. Now, first of all, some of you may be like, well, this is kind of a misleading question, because when she starts, the machine isn't trying to do anything. But it's still consistent to what we said. Remember when we said there's no external force, so you have to make motion happen? And you make motion happen with concentric work. She can't push herself over. So that immediate initial right transverse pelvic girdle rotation has to be with concentric work. And then immediately, once she creates tension, the external force is trying to bring her back. So either way, it still is consistent to what I taught you. Okay? So motion-wise, she's going to have right transverse pelvic, then left transverse pelvic. But from the perspective of her trunk, is she looking at her right hip or her left hip to start? Right. And when she goes all the way across, she's going to be looking at her left hip, right? So I know she's going to be undergoing left transverse trunk, followed by right transverse trunk. In addition, she has to make that left transverse trunk happen through concentric work, because the machine is trying to spin her trunk to the right. So what group of muscles must she use? Her left transverse trunk rotators to make herself twist her trunk to the left through concentric work. Before I move on, is there any questions as to why she needs left transverse trunk rotators? The muscles. Look, what are those muscles I'm going to teach you guys in biomechanics? Right external oblique, left internal oblique, left erector spinae, even the left lat, if you really want to get into it. But it's the concept of I need muscles to pull to the left and muscles to pull to the right. What are those muscles? Who cares? I just need muscles to pull in every direction of motion. And I know for a fact I need to make a phone call to the ones that are spinning my trunk to the left. Yes, sir.
So the right transverse pelvic rotation doesn't have any agonist muscles, correct?
Incorrect. And we're semantics here. The basketball spinning, when I took the basketball and spun the basketball, I needed my hands to spin it, right? Here, you need your trunk to spin the pelvis. But it's not always your trunk muscles that spin the pelvis, right? Sometimes it could be your hip muscles that spin the pelvis. So because it could be different groups of muscles, we need to identify those specific muscles that are responsible for spinning the basketball.
So you can't call it concentric or eccentric because you don't know which one.
Oh, I know.
But it's still concentric.
I'm just messing with you. Like,
But
no, I think the semantics here isn't concentric or eccentric. It's the fact that for this class, we're not going to say I have pelvic girdle rotators. I have trunk muscles that can rotate the pelvis, but I still need to look at those muscles from the perspective of the trunk and how they're spinning the basketball. Does that make sense? So I was trying to lighten up the movement. You look serious with your question. I was just joking. So regardless of what they are, you can see how that spin of the pelvis isn't going to happen on its own. The machine isn't trying to spin, so we have to have concentric work to make that happen, correct? Well, as the pelvis looks to the right, that's only possible because the trunk is looking to the left. So we can use those clues to say, well, if she forces the trunk to look to the left through concentric work, it has to be the left transverse trunk rotators through concentric work. And those muscles spun the basketball to the right. But again, it doesn't have to be the trunk muscles. Sometimes I could use the hip muscles. Okay? So, left transverse trunk rotators. Now, this makes sense that if the machine is going to be trying to spin her pelvis to the left or her trunk to the right, that I'm going to need to use those muscles the whole time. Concentric work and then eccentric work, right? So when she goes all the way across, that was concentric. Now, there was change in direction, but her muscles didn't need to change direction. She's going to let off and let the machine, the weight stack, slow down her right transverse pelvic and then speed up her left transverse pelvic. I had a change in direction, but I had concentric followed by an eccentric. So that's not plyometric sequence of the agonistic group that I'm using here, right? Where is my plyometric sequence? Back here. Back when she needs to slow down left transverse pelvic or right transverse trunk, and then change her direction and speed this up to keep doing reps. Okay? So where's the plyometric sequence? In that area. In that area when she's going to be doing repetitions. Okay? Make sense? Shoot.
So you can only have plyometrics when it's concentric, eccentric, and then a change of direction.
Ooh, what a great question. You don't have to. And I can give you an example. You want me to give you an example? What if you started in a position, let's say, I know this is going extreme, but we can do it. Let's say you're laying in bed and your arm's stretched out, right? And you come up and then you let it drop and then bring it back up, right? You didn't have concentric, gravity sped you up, and then your flexors had to slow you down, and then flexors speed up. So that was the plyometric sequence. So although it's extremely common in exercises that you're going to do the concentric first, and I'm not saying that's not likely and that's not the rule, there are exceptions that we can make when we let external forces speed us up, and then we got to slow it down and bring it up. So I just want to make sure that you don't look at it as all the time. Very commonly, majority of the time, but it doesn't have to be all the time.
So in this particular case, it's only plyometric, like in the beginning segment of it, when you're doing repetitions, not when you're going from here to there and finishing this way, right?
It would actually, you'd have your first plyometric sequence after you do your first repetition. So in other words, your first repetition, you would not have a plyometric sequence because the weight stack is stopped it. And then she would speed it up, weight stack would slow it down, weight stack would speed it up, then her muscles would have to slow it down and then speed it up. So that first repetition, you wouldn't have that sequence. Great questions, and I'm glad you asked it. Yeah, ma'am?
Is this only, is the machine only pushing one direction?
But the machine could be reset to push in another direction, right? So like at the one in the weight room, she could reposition the seat so that her knees are pointed to the right when the weight stack is touching. So she has to make it go left, and then allow it to go right. So she can reposition the machine any way she wants. She can actually reposition the machine where she starts here and then makes it go here and then lets it come back, yeah. But again, the clues, we know that this is her start position because all the weights are touching.
If you were doing like a Russian twist, which is basically like this on the ground, right?
I was actually gonna do that one next.
Okay.
What a great question.
Because, like, wouldn't it be, like, you would switch?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I did not mean to terrify you right there. I was excited. I was excited that your little hamsters were like, well, wait, would it switch the role, right? Would there be a switchation of agonistic muscles? Absolutely. Because when her legs are on this side, gravity is trying to right transverse pelvic girdle rotator. When her legs are on the other side, gravity is trying to left transverse pelvic girdle rotator. So your muscles would actually switch. Absolutely. Absolutely. We were going to do that next, but there's only 5 minutes. You want to save that one for Wednesday? So this is what we're going to do, though. We're going to set that question up. Wait, guys, don't leave. Because even though we're going to discuss it Wednesday, I want y'all to give some thought to the question. So that way Wednesday we can. Is that similar to what you were asking? Is that similar to what you were asking? Okay. So again, let's say he starts here and then he brings his legs to the other side. Do you see how in that full range of motion you change what the external force is trying to do to you? Right? Here, the external force is trying to plop his feet to his left. But when you flip over to the other side, gravity's trying to plop his feet to the right. So when you change what the external force is trying to do, you're going to change who you're going to make a phone call to. Here's a quick, easy example of something like that would change. If I have a dumbbell, here gravity's trying to extend me, but if I go here, gravity's trying to flex me. So it's kind of one of those midway things where it's trying to bring you back to midway. Was today helpful? All right. Okay, guys, y'all have a good day.